Good evening, everyone. It is an incredible zechus to be able to be here with all of you. I feel not as bad. Last time I was supposed to be with you in Florida. All right, so I felt bad missing out on Florida. So here, at least, we're all on Zoom. So it's an incredible privilege to be able to share with you some insights to prepare for the upcoming Untitled of Purim. So to kind of just frame a little bit what I'd like to try to accomplish in the few minutes we have this evening, I want to start with the Rambam, Maimonides. And the Rambam in the laws of Megillah says something absolutely amazing. And when you first hear it, it's actually a little bit startling. So the Rambam says as follows. The Rambam says, in the Messianic era, when Mashiach comes, most of the books of Nach, Nevi'im and Ksuvim, the prophets, the scriptures, we're not really going to learn them anymore. They're kind of going to be relegated to a secondary level of importance. And just to understand why that is, on a basic level, that's because most of the Svarim of Nevi'im and Ksuvim really focus on prophecies regarding the Messianic era, how to prepare ourselves for the Messianic era, and the fallout from the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash and the second Beis HaMikdash temples. And so, therefore, again, when Mashiach comes, a lot of the relevance of the Nevi'im and Ksuvim, the prophets, the scriptures, will kind of be set aside. But the Rambam says there is one incredible exception to this, and that's Megillah Esther. The Rambam says that Megillah Esther, even when Mashiach comes, is still his lashon is over here. Chutz mi Megillah Esther, harehi kayemes kechamishe chumshei Torah. The Rambam says Megillah Esther, the book of Esther, is so incredibly important, he puts it on the same level, on the same tier as the Chumash. Isn't that incredible? The Megillah Esther is of the same level of importance as the 5 books of the Torah. He goes, okay, Hilcho Shel Torah Shabbat Peh. Or he gives, for example, it's just as important as the oral tradition, right? The oral law, the Talmud, the Mishnah, everything we have, the Shulchan Aruch. Megillah Esther, the book of Esther, is just as important as any of these other works. And therefore, ultimately, again, they'll never be negated. So the same way that will always have Chumash, right? The Chumashim will always remain intact. And the same way that will always have Halacha, Jewish law. So too, we will always have Megillah Esther. The problem, of course, is that the Rambam doesn't explain why this is. In other words, we know the story of the Megillah, right? We know the story. We know the story of young Esther forced into a life not of her own choosing, but yet somehow she manages to become this courageous young woman, the architect of salvation, together with Mordechai. Hashem, although his name is not mentioned throughout the entire Megillah, but we know that he is the ultimate choreographer of every event occurring inside of the Megillah. We know the story, and it's an incredible story. But the truth is, we're privileged people. We have a lot of great stories. We have a lot of incredible miracles. And we have so many wonderful things to reflect on and to learn from. And yet again, it appears according to the Rambam, as important as the book of Ruth is, when Mashiach comes, we're not going to learn it anymore. Koheles, right? Shira Shirim, these are all beautiful works. But Mashiach comes, we're not really going to be focusing on them anymore. But Megillah Esther, forever. So what I'd like to try to do tonight for the few minutes we have together is to try to understand a little bit, what is it that's so special about Megillah Esther? What is it that's so unique? What is it that's of such pivotal importance that the Megillah will remain intact and in effect, and to learn from it, even when Mashiach comes? So I'll share with you a couple of ideas. To appreciate the first idea, so I want to point out something very interesting in the Megillah. If you look at the beginning of the story, you'll find something amazing. The Megillah begins with a story about a feast. This just wasn't any feast. This was the mother of all feasts. Achashverosh throws a party like no one's business. And Achashverosh has a party for the men, and Vashti has a party for the women. And at some point in time, Achashverosh comes along and he invites Vashti to join him at the men's party. Okay? Vashti refuses. There's a whole back and forth. The back and forth doesn't end well for Vashti. She's ultimately executed by Achashverosh. You'll take a look in your Megillah, in Meretz Hashem, this coming Wednesday night, and you'll notice something amazing. Every single time that Achashverosh refers to Vashti, he calls her Vashti Hamalka, Vashti the queen. Every single time Vashti responds to Achashverosh, she responds as Hamalka Vashti, Queen Vashti. And the Malbim, in his commentary on the Megillah, says something incredibly profound. Achashverosh, when he was reaching out to his wife, whenever he spoke to Vashti, wanted to remind Vashti, you're only the queen because you're married to me. You're not a queen on your own right. You're not Vashti Hamalka. You're not Queen Vashti. You're Vashti the queen. You're Vashti, and then you became queen because ultimately you married me. I am your claim to the throne. I am your claim to greatness. Without me, you're a nothing. And Vashti was not a timid woman. So Vashti responds back to Achashverosh. I think, my dear husband, she probably didn't say my dear husband, but I think, my dear husband, you've got it all wrong. You're the one, the Gemara says, who started out as the stable boy. You're not royalty. You don't really deserve to sit on that throne. And the only reason why you have any level of monarchical legitimacy is because you're married to me, Vashti. See, Vashti was royalty. Vashti was the daughter, the granddaughter, and the great-granddaughter of great and powerful kings, most notably Nebuchadnezzar. Her great-grandfather was the man who destroyed the first Beis Hamikdash. So Vashti says to Achashverosh, Achutzpah, you're calling me Vashti Hamalka? And so she responds as Hamalka Vashti. And what you begin to see is something really incredible. Because if we were to do a psychological profile on Achashverosh, what you would see is a man who suffered from terribly low self-esteem. Achashverosh has no self-esteem. Achashverosh has no self-worth. Achashverosh has no positive sense of self. He doesn't possess it. That's why, again, in order, right, the telltale sign of people who lack self-esteem is they push down others in order to build themselves up. So here, Achashverosh has to put down his own wife in order to make himself feel like the legitimate monarch. You ever go ahead and look at the Megillah, and the story is so strange. Fast forward a little bit further in the Megillah. Haman comes to Achashverosh, and Haman says to Achashverosh, Achashverosh, Yeshno am echad mefuzar umefura bin ha'amim. There is a people who lives amongst you in our nation, and they're scattered. And king, they don't keep our customs. They don't follow our laws. They're kind of just the people onto themselves. They live on the periphery, and they're just not part of us. Let's annihilate them. Let's destroy them. Let's destroy them. And we know Achashverosh says, okay. And it's bizarre. Why is it bizarre? It'd be tempting to say, okay, Achashverosh is such an anti-Semite. There's only one problem. Haman never told Achashverosh which people he's referring to. Right? Haman never said, oh, by the way, it's the Jews. He never said that. It's only after the decrees are written that it's in the decree it's written to wipe out the Jewish people. Haman never even told Achashverosh which nation he wanted to annihilate. So tell me, how could it be that if Achashverosh didn't know which nation to annihilate, that he's just so quick to go ahead and say, okay, to annihilate men, women, and children? Because Haman was a master manipulator. And Haman understood that Achashverosh lacked self-esteem, lacked self-worth, lacked true identity, and he preyed upon it. Haman was a master manipulator. And it's from Achashverosh that we learn in the Megillah the need for positive self-esteem, the need to feel good about ourselves. I'll tell you something amazing. There's a concept in Judaism called being dan lekaf zichus, which means giving someone the benefit of the doubt. So on a most basic level, what this means is if you see someone doing something and it looks like it could be something wrong, you should try to go ahead and create a positive narrative to explain that person's actions. So I'll give you a simple idea. So I see Ruvain putting his hand into Shimon's coat. Shimon's coat is, let's say, hung up in the closet. I see him putting his hand into Shimon's coat and pulling out a $20 bill from Shimon's coat. Okay, so I can look at that and I say, Ruvain's a thief. Ruvain's a thief, right? You see over here, he's literally taking something that does not belong to him. Or being down the kafsus, giving someone the benefit of the doubt, is I can say, no, maybe Ruvain had given Shimon that money to hold, right? He had given it to him hold, and he's just taking back that which was rightfully his, being down the kafsus. Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says something so profound. The Rebbe says, so what happens? What happens if you can't find something positive, right? So let's take the same scenario. I see Reuven go over to Shimon's coat, take out Shimon's wallet, take out Shimon's cash from the wallet, the credit cards from the wallet, everything else that doesn't move from the wallet. It's kind of hard to ascribe a positive narrative to that. And pretty much it looks like Reuven is stealing something. So how do you go ahead and give someone the benefit of the doubt in that scenario? And by the way, this happens all the time. We always like to try to see the positive. We always like to see the good. We always like to insert that positive narrative. But there are times in life where I see someone do something wrong and there's just no two ways about it. There's no other side of the story. There's no, oh, well, maybe he meant this, or maybe she was doing this. What they're doing is unequivocally wrong. So asks Rabbi Nachman, how do you give someone the benefit of the doubt when it's clear that what they're doing is unequivocally wrong? And the Rebbe says something amazing. He says, in that moment, when I see Reuven taking Shimon's wallet, and it's clear to me that Reuven is a thief, in that moment, look for something positive in Reuven. Look for something positive. Look for some other redeeming quality. There's no way for me to go ahead and kind of like look at the act of theft differently. It is what it is. He's a thief. He's a thief. But I could go ahead and I could try to find something positive in Reuven himself. See, what the Rebbe is saying is something amazing, that proper relationships are built on being able to find something positive in the other. Remember, I think I mentioned this in the last year that I gave to this group, which is that, in every relationship, if there's one thing you could count on, it's disappointment. And I don't say that like in a jaded and cynical way, but it's real, because human beings are finite and human beings are imperfect, and we all try our best, but inevitably we all fall and we all fail. So how do you maintain proper relationships? And this is what Rabbi Nachman is teaching us. Rabbi Nachman tells us, when you see something bad in another, and it's clear that it's bad. It's not just me being hypercritical or me being a little bit judgmental. I see something unequivocally, no question, it's bad. It's bad. The Rebbe says, in that moment, look for something good. In that moment, look for something positive from that very individual. And then Rabbi Nachman takes it one step further. He says, we have to apply the same thing to ourselves. That sometimes, it's an amazing thing about how many of us go through life, and when we look in the mirror, we're not happy with the person who's staring back at us. I'm just not happy with myself. And that can be for a variety of reasons. That could have to do with certain externalities. It could have to do with certain internalities. But very often, when we look in the mirror, the person we see staring back at us, I'm just not happy with that person. And there's this interesting dialectic in Judaism, because on one hand, Judaism forces us to focus on growth, right? The beauty of Yiddishkeit is, if somebody asks you, so tell me, you're a Jew, when are you done, right? At what point in time can you say, okay, I finished my Judaism, like I got this, I reached the level, I reached the finish mark. And of course, there is an answer. The answer is after 120, right? When you return your neshama to your maker, you're done. But until that point in time, each and every day, there's more to do, there's more to accomplish. So sometimes what ends up happening is as follows. When we get into a growth-oriented mindset, which is so important and so profound, sometimes what it creates is a sense of unhappiness with who we are. I want to grow. I'm not happy with where I am. You could want to grow and not be happy with where you are presently because you want to move yourself forward. But I always have to find good inside of myself. Every single day when I look in the mirror, I have to find something positive in the reflection that's staring back at me. Just like I have to look for something good in others, even when I know that they've sinned, I have to look for good inside of myself, even when I know that I've sinned as well. And we've all sinned. I'm not even taking a show of hands, right? We've all sinned. We've all made mistakes. The only question in life is how severe your mistakes are. But we all make mistakes. We all fall. We all fail. And successful Judaic living requires a balanced perception of self. I make mistakes, and maybe I make a lot of mistakes, and maybe I've made some real doozies, real bad mistakes. But there's good inside of me. There is good. And Rabbi Nachman says each and every day I have an obligation to identify the good and to articulate the good. And it sounds a little bit corny, but to be able, just like we know that as Jews, we're supposed to go ahead and acknowledge and own our shortcomings and mistakes. But do we also know that we're supposed to acknowledge and own our accomplishments and our positive strides and the things that are going well and things that I'm doing right? Because if we don't find a way to become happy with ourselves, then at the end of the day, we lack positive self-esteem. And when you don't have self-esteem, when you don't have positive self-worth, when you don't feel good about who you are, there are two problems that happen. Generally, you accomplish very little in life. Because if you don't believe in yourself, you're not really going anywhere. And second of all, what often ends up happening is we gravitate towards where someone else could give us positive self-esteem. And sometimes the people who will build us up aren't always necessarily the best influences on us as well. We have to work on having a healthy sense of self. The story of the Megillah, the entire story of the Megillah is all directed, the potentially cataclysmic series of events were triggered by a man, Achashverosh, who I'm sure he wasn't a really good guy, but the truth is we have no indication from the Megillah that he was an exceptionally bad guy. We just know that he was a man who had absolutely no self-esteem. And so all he does is he puts down other people and aligns himself with people who will make him feel good about himself. Instead of looking inward, instead of developing himself, instead of owning his faults and his failures, but at the same time acknowledging his good, he just simply aligns himself with whoever makes him feel good. By the way, this works on the end of the Megillah as well. Remember again, Esther, at the end of the Megillah, invites Haman and Achashverosh to a party. And remember again, Achashverosh is so happy to have the attention of his bride. He's so happy to have the attention of his wife. You know what he says to Esther? Esther, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. Ad chatzi hamalchus, I'll give you half of the kingdom. I don't understand, like, why? First of all, he doesn't have to say that. He's the king. He can do whatever he wants because someone gave him attention. And so so his self-worth, his self-esteem was lifted a little bit. So suddenly he's ready to do anything and everything. That's why Esther also manipulated him. Esther manipulated Achashverosh as well. And Esther manipulated, she understood that we're dealing with a man without any self-esteem, make him feel important, make him feel good. No, do what you want. And sure enough, what does Achashverosh do? He goes ahead and he turns on Haman. The very man who built up his self-esteem in the beginning of the Megillah falls prey to the woman at the end of the Megillah who now builds up Achashverosh's self-esteem. It's a profound idea. But so many times in life we're Achashverosh and we don't even realize it. I don't feel good about myself. And it's funny because, well, it's not funny, but it's fascinating to see how many people walk through life with negative self-esteem, with negative self-worth. People just don't feel good about themselves. And the truth is we mask it very well. To the world, I look confident. To the world, I look happy. To the world, I look well-adjusted. But in those moments when I'm alone with myself, I feel like I'm nothing. I feel like I am the sum total of all of my failures. That's what I am. I feel like I'm never going to be the person I want to be. And in those moments, you have to hear Rabbi Nachman whispering in your ear saying, find something good. Find something good. Judge yourself favorably. Find something good. Because if you could find something good in yourself, you'll build up your self-esteem. And if you build up your self-worth, you build up your self-esteem. That's when you accomplish. And I'll tell you something amazing. I learned this lesson in such a beautifully profound way. In our shul here in Baltimore, Baruch Hashem, we try to always make davening something very beautiful and very moving, especially Shabbos and Yom Tov. And Shabbos night, Kabbalah Shabbos, is always my favorite time of the week. We have a beautiful Kabbalah Shabbos, like a Karlbach Kabbalah Shabbos. That's really beautiful and really uplifting. And we sing and we dance by the end of Lechadodi. Very, very beautiful. So I have a young boy in my shul, a sweet, sweet neshama, a young boy with Down syndrome. And he loves to dance. So comes Kabbalah Shabbos, he's dancing, he's singing, beautiful, beautiful. And what he also does every week after Kabbalah Shabbos, he comes over and he starts talking to me. He strikes up a conversation, literally again in the middle of shul. Good. So one week he comes over to me and he says to me as follows. I'm sorry, that's my phone, my apologies. He says to me, Rabbi Silber, I just want to tell you, I am very, very happy. I'm very, very happy. Why am I very, very happy? Listen to the words he said. I know that I am just the way Hashem wants me to be. I know that I am just the way Hashem wants me to be. And I'll tell you, I had to hold back the tears. I am privileged in my life to have many great teachers, to have many great Rebbeim who have taught me many incredible lessons in life. But no one has ever been a Rebbe to me like this young boy after dancing at the end of Lecha Dodi. I am happy because I know I am just the way Hashem wants me to be. And that's something we have to strive for. That doesn't mean complacency. That doesn't mean complacency. But you know, when we fall and we fail because of different internal struggles we have, you know where those internal struggles came from? They came from Hashem. When I have certain desires and wants and lusts and proclivities, I didn't purchase those. I didn't acquire those. Just Baruch Hu gave those to me. And so ultimately, again, the whole package of me is all from Hashem. It's all from Hashem. And so often in life, we get down on ourselves because of our mistakes, because of our missteps, and we allow our missteps and our mistakes to define the totality of who and what we are. And the moment we do that, again, is the moment my self-esteem goes down the drain, is the moment my self-worth goes down the drain. And in that moment, when you lose your self-esteem, you lose your self-worth, you're not going to accomplish anything. Because the moment you stop believing in yourself, the moment you stop believing that you are a worthwhile human being, that Hashem loves you, that you're important with all of your mistakes and all of your baggage, the moment I forget that is the moment that at the end of the day, I can't accomplish anything. And I think that this is an incredible lesson from Megillah Esther. And it's a lesson not learned from Esther, because the truth is, if there's one thing that Esther Hamalka had, it was confidence. Esther had a remarkable amount of confidence. I don't know where she got it from. I don't know how she acquired it. I don't know who taught her the incredible life skills that she clearly possessed. But Esther had confidence. Mordechai has confidence. Haman, a ton of confidence. Too much confidence, overconfidence. Achashverosh, zero. And when you have zero self-esteem and zero self-confidence and zero self-worth, not only do you ruin yourself, but you could ruin all of those around you as well. Lesson number one from the Megillah, the power of positive self-esteem. Let me share with you one more. Actually, I'll share with you two more. They'll be short. Second one is as follows. In my, what I think is the most profound exchange in the Megillah. So we have Mordechai comes to Esther. He sends a message to Esther, right? Esther's already a queen. She's in the palace. And Mordechai hears about the decree of Haman to go ahead and annihilate the Jewish people. And Mordechai sends word to Esther about the decree. And he says to Esther, you have to go to the king and you have to supplicate. You have to beseech the king on our behalf. And it's interesting. What's her original reply? Her original reply was, no. No, I mean, she doesn't say no. What she says is, everyone knows, if you go to the king without being summoned, you run the risk of execution. It was sometimes somebody asks you for something and you're going to say no, but you just feel bad saying no. So you give like a whole explanation, and everyone's thoroughly confused at the end of it. I think they said no. They say no, kind of what Esther did. She doesn't want to say no to Mordechai. So she says, I can't go to the king. You haven't been summoned. She says no. And Mordechai says something absolutely amazing to Esther, which is, okay, Esther, if you are quiet, if you are silent at this time, it's okay. Salvation will come from someone else. You see, God doesn't need us to accomplish his plans. God gives us the privilege to partner with him in the actualization of the divine plan, but he doesn't need us. So Mordechai therefore says to Esther, if you don't want to act, if you don't want to go, if you don't want to help, that's okay. Salvation will come from someone else. But then Mordechai says to Esther something amazing. You and your father's home, you'll be lost forever. Im la'is kazo sigat lamalchus. And who knows, perhaps it was for this very moment that you became the queen. And the commentaries are bothered by this verse. I understand the first part. It's okay, Esther, if you don't want to go, that's fine. God has many messengers. God has many emissaries. God has many able people. So someone else will be the messenger of God for salvation. But what is it when Mordechai says to Esther, you and your father's home will disappear forever? And who knows, maybe it was for this moment that you became queen. And the Malbim, one of the commentaries on the Megillah, says something absolutely amazing. The Malbim explains so beautifully that life is filled with incredible moments of potential accomplishment. Life is filled with incredible moments of self-actualization. And sometimes God puts us on this earth to accomplish one thing in one moment. And the incredibly overwhelming reality is that if I miss my moment, I run the risk of denying meaning to my entire life. And not only that, says the Malbim, sometimes God brings about multiple generations just to bring about one person to accomplish one thing in one moment. And if I miss my moment, I run the risk of denying meaning to my life and those who came before me. And says the Malbim, this is what Mordechai was saying to Esther. Mordechai says to Esther, dear Esther, this may be your moment. Did you ever wonder why you became queen? Did you ever wonder why this crazy confluence of events occurred that led you to the palace? You didn't want to be part of the beauty pageant. You didn't want to be the queen. You didn't want this life. You didn't want this. You didn't want any of this. But now you're queen. Esther, is it possible that this is your moment? That this is your moment. And if you fail to seize it, it's not that the divine plan won't actualize. The divine plan will come to fruition regardless. But if you don't seize your moment, Esther, you run the risk of denying meaning to your entire existence. And Esther, perhaps the only reason your parents lived and your grandparents lived and your great-grandparents lived was to bring you, Esther, into this world so that you could accomplish this one important thing in this one moment. And dear Esther, if you don't seize this moment, you deny meaning to your life and to all those who came before you. Mordechai wasn't telling her an unequivocal fact. He was just saying maybe. And I've always thought that this Malbim is so profound because what an incredible metaphor for our lives as well. Life is filled with so many incredible moments, moments of accomplishment, moments of self-actualization, moments when we have the ability to make a difference. You know, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, the great Baal Shem Tov said that when you see something that is broken in this world, the only reason Hashem has allowed you to see it is because you have the ability, the power, and the prowess to somehow address it. And isn't that an incredible idea? So a person has a broken relationship. If I'm in a broken relationship, I have a choice. I could lament it or I could try to fix it. Now, it's true in relationships. At the end of the day, it takes two. I could want to fix the relationship, but if the other party has no interest, there's only so much I could do, but I could try. I could do my part. And maybe that's my moment. When I see an opportunity to fix a relationship, grab it. I see an opportunity for chesed, an opportunity to do something good for another person. I see someone who's down, who's struggling. So I could let out a krechts, right? I could sign, I could do, or I could roll up my sleeves and I could do something. Life is filled with incredible moments. The challenge of the human condition is that often we just let these moments kind of pass us by. You know, easy come, easy go. They come in easy, they leave easy, and we'll figure, well, I'll catch the next one, I'll catch the next one, I'll catch the next one. And it's true, maybe I'll catch the next one, but maybe the one that got away was my moment. Maybe that was mine. Maybe that's why Hashem put me here in this world. Now, you know, the difficult part of all of it is, you see, Mordechai doesn't say to Esther, Esther, this is your moment. He doesn't say this is your moment. He says maybe. Because remember, again, the Megillah is a story without prophecy. The Megillah is actually the first book of Tanakh written in the post-prophetic era. There's no prophet. There's no Navi. There's no right. There's no prophet. There's no prophecy. There's no voice of God that's coming through man to tell us what's going on. So Mordechai says to Esther, Esther, I have no idea if this is your moment or not. No idea. But I think it may be. And I think it's a good idea for you to think about whether or not this is your moment. And whether or not the only reason you were put on this earth, and your parents and your grandparents put on this earth, is to put you where you are right now. So are you ready to seize that moment or not? Life is filled with meaningful moments. Life is filled with dramatic opportunities. I was this morning I had the privilege, I just got back from Canada. I was in Toronto. Baruch Hashem, I had the opportunity to give a couple of shiurim there. And I spoke this morning at the Beis Yaakov in Toronto. And I was speaking to the girls about a similar concept, about going ahead and being vigilant and watchful for our moments. And the mashal I gave them is like, so often in life, we're distracted, right? We're so distracted, right? We're never really, look, I'm going to be honest right now. We're on Zoom, right? I'm just going to tell you, because I do this all the time also, I guarantee you, if you have your camera off, you're probably doing something else while you're going ahead and watching the shiur. And by the way, totally good. That's all right. That's all right. I'm just saying, at the end of the day, we're always multitasking. All right? We're always doing different stuff. That's the way that it is. Think about, in your life, when was the last time you actually gave something 1,000% attention? And again, I'm including myself in this, because I can't remember the last time I gave something or someone my complete undivided attention, which means not only am I there physically, but emotionally, mentally, I'm plugged in as well. We're so distracted, right? We never do one thing. I'm doing this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to watch this, I'm going to do this, and this. And of course, we fool ourselves into thinking that because we're doing more things, concurrently, that we're more productive. And the truth is we're not. We just do more stuff in a more mediocre fashion. So I get more things done, right? The quantity goes up, but the quality goes dramatically down. And because often we're just unattentive in life, we miss moments, we miss opportunities. Not a day goes by that HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't send some dramatic moment to us, right? Again, maybe it is the moment, maybe it's not, or maybe life is comprised of a series of dramatic moments. But at the end of the day, you have to be plugged in. You have to be attentive. See, Mordechai says to Esther, you're not paying attention. You're not paying attention. You're caught up in just your own issues, in your own personal safety. You're not paying attention. Esther, there's a moment here. And how careful we have to be to pay attention. Like, I started reading a lot more on the topic of mindfulness, of being a mindful individual. And it's incredible, some of the exercises of mindfulness. Take a look at a room. They sound corny. I didn't do it at first, but then I realized it's incredible. You take a look at a room, or you look out a window and take in everything. What color are the trees? What color is the sky? What direction is the wind blowing? Are there birds? What type of, take in, and it's amazing. It's amazing. Such a simple exercise of just being mindful and aware of like just what the world, what the sky looks like. But so often in life, we're just distracted. Yeah, we're super productive, doing a million different things. We're doing a million different things, and at the same time, missing a million meaningful moments. Mordechai says to Esther, don't miss your moment in life. Because if you do so, then at the end of the day, you run the risk of denying meaning to your life. One last lesson. And this is, we're going to fast forward out of the Megillah. With this, I'll conclude. The Gemara Maseches Megillah describes an amazing exchange. And the Gemara says that after the Purim story is over, Esther reached out to the rabbis. And she reached out to the rabbanim, to the rabbis, and she said, Kisvuni ladoros, kivuni ladoros. She goes ahead and she says, go ahead and include my story. Include my story ultimately as part of Tanakh, right? As part of the books of the Torah, and establish my story as a Yom Tiv. Okay, that's what Esther. So again, there's a whole discussion back and forth. The rabbis aren't so comfortable with it. Okay. The great tzaddik Rabbi Yitzchak Berdichev, the great Hasidic master, says, Esther, what gaiva, what arrogance. You tell the rabbis, I want you to include my story in the books of Tanakh. Okay, first there's a lot of miracles of the Jewish people, right? And you tell the rabbis, I want this story of Purim to become a Yom Tiv. So Esther, Rabbi Yitzchak says, it just seems so arrogant. It seems so self-absorbed. It seems so pompous. What are you asking? And Rabbi Yitzchak says something so incredibly profound. He says, Esther, think about Esther. How are we introduced to Esther? The first thing the Megillah tells about Esther, Ki ein la av va'ein. She was an orphan. She had no one. There was no family network. There was no system of advocacy for her. Not only that, by the way, what was Esther's name? This is incredible. What was Esther's name? There's a dispute in the Gemara. Was her name Esther? Was her name Hadassah? Both names are used. Isn't that strange, by the way? There's no one else. We're not sure what their name is. And the Gemara has a dispute about this. What is her real name? What is her given name? What's her descriptive name? She's the heroine of the story, the architect of salvation, and yet we don't know her name because there's a certain level of identity ambiguity. You see, Esther begins life with incredibly difficult circumstances. No parents, no family, no firm identity. So says Rabbi Yitzchak, if you were looking at Esther as a little girl, what would you assume that she would amount to? And the truth is, you would assume not much. Not much. Everything is against her, right? The whole deck is stacked against her. Well, what is she going to do? Who's going to advocate for her? What is her identity going to be? Who's going to raise her? Who's going to instill values in her? You look at a young girl like this and Nebuch. You can say, can't expect that she's going to amount to all that much. And look what this young girl becomes. She becomes a confident, assertive, powerful, strong Jewish woman. Esther Hamalka ranks up there amongst the best of the best that the Jewish people have produced. She becomes confident. She becomes assertive. She becomes decisive. She becomes powerful. And says something amazing. Esther says to the rabbis, I want you to include my story in Tanakh, in the books of Tanakh. Why? She's not looking for self-aggrandizement. She's not looking for praise. She's not looking to be looked at as important. She says, I want my story to inspire other people. Because what's the story of Esther Hamalka? That no matter what your beginnings are, no matter how many circumstances are stacked against you, no matter how much adversity you may face, no matter how many compromised circumstances you may have to contend with, if you put your mind to it, you can make yourself into something. Esther did not choose so many of her life circumstances. She didn't choose to be an orphan. She didn't choose to marry Achashverosh. You know, it hurts. I'll tell you, when we finish Megillah's Esther, we finished the Megillah, and when I was to finish the Megillah, everybody starts singing. I'm not going to sing for you, but right? We start singing, incredible. And I always think to myself, it's amazing. Everyone's celebrating, except who? Esther Hamalka. Because Esther is stuck in a marriage she doesn't want to be in. She's stuck in a life she doesn't want to be. You know, Lord Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, Zichron Livracha, said that in the world of literature, there are often two different types of stories. There are myths and there are fairy tales. Myths, like if you ever read Greek mythology, it's always the gods who are trying to undermine man. So we don't believe in mythology. Because Baruch Hu not only does he not undermine us, but at the end of the day, he advocates for us. But we also don't have fairy tales. Because how does every single fairy tale end? And everyone lived happily ever after. The truth is, we don't have one story that ends and everybody lived happily ever after. We have stories that end and everyone lived, and that's incredible. And the Megillah is a story like that. But is it everyone lived happily ever after? You know, according to the Gemara, Mordechai and Esther were husband and wife. Could we imagine the pain of Esther seeing Mordechai every single day and Mordechai seeing his beloved wife married to another man and totally powerless to do anything about it? Esther, who was a pure Jewish woman, now again locked in a life, in a lifestyle, in a world not of her choosing. And there's no out. There's no out. There's only one way that the queens of the Persian Median Empire got out, like Vashti got out. That's only one way. This is Esther's life for the rest of her life. Esther didn't choose so many of her circumstances, not in her birth and not in the rest of her life. But yet Esther shows us that no matter how difficult and overwhelming your personal circumstances may be, if you put your mind to it, you could accomplish great things. I want to be clear. It doesn't mean that you could have a fairy tale life. And it doesn't mean that everything's going to go your way. And it doesn't mean everything's going to work out the way you would like it to work out. But you can make something and someone great of yourself, no matter how overwhelming the circumstances of your life may be. That's why Esther wanted her story made into a Yom Tov. That's why Esther wanted her story to become one of the books of Tanakh, of the Torah. Because at the end of the day, she wanted her story to inspire us. Because how often in life do we face overwhelming circumstances? And before we even realize, we just give up. We just give up. We just give up. And Esther comes along and inspires us and tells us, life could get really difficult. And sometimes things happen that you never dreamt would happen. And sometimes those very things are not things you brought upon yourself. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was external circumstances foisted upon me. So you have a choice. You could buckle, you could give in, and you could give up. Or you could go ahead and gird yourself with strength, straighten yourself back up, and figure out how to maximize the circumstances that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given you. And that was the greatness of Esther HaMelech. So to tie this all together, remember 43 minutes ago, I told you the Rambam, right? And the Rambam said that the power of Megillah Esther is that even when Mashiach comes, Emeretz Hashem, which happens speedily in our days, when Mashiach comes, so the books of Tanakh, or I should say the books of Nach, right? The Nevi'im and Ksubim, the prophets, the scriptures, ultimately will kind of be relegated to a secondary tier of importance. But Megillah Esther is like the Chumash. Megillah Esther will always occupy a central place within our Torah. But Ram doesn't explain why, but now we understand why. Because it's through the Megillah that we learn these three incredible life lessons that are necessary for successful living. Lesson number one, to cultivate positive self-esteem, to look for the good inside of ourselves, not to ignore our shortcomings, not to ignore our faults, not to ignore our frailties or our failures, but to not allow them to define the totality of who we are, to find something good. And when I find something good, that enables me to believe in myself. And when I believe in myself, I can feel good about myself. And when I feel good about myself, I can have self-esteem. And when I have self-esteem, I can be confident. And when I'm confident, I can accomplish great things. Lesson number two, be on the lookout for the meaningful moments of life, because life is filled with them. But if you're distracted, or if you're multitasking, or if I'm just all over the place, then at the end of the day, I can miss my moment. And sometimes Hashem just places us in this world to accomplish one thing in one moment. And lesson number three, no matter what life circumstances have been visited upon you, if you put your mind to it, you can make yourself into something and someone great. We often do not choose the circumstances of our lives, but we absolutely choose how we respond to them and how we maximize them. These are the lessons of Esther HaMelech. Some of them, there are many more, but these are three of the lessons of Esther HaMelech. And I think what the Rambam is teaching us is that these lessons are so needed and necessary for impactful, meaningful, and rich living, that even when Mashiach comes and all of the other books of Nevi'im and Ksuvim are relegated to a second tier of importance, we will hold Megillah Esther in our hands. We will hold Megillah Esther in our hearts and allow the lessons of the Megillah of Esther HaMalka to inspire us for eternity. We should hope that on this Purim, Emir Hashem, should reflect a little bit on these lessons. Hopefully go ahead and incorporate these lessons into our lives and allow these lessons to guide us, Emir Hashem, in the days, the weeks, and the years to come. It's been a great sichos to the old Torah with all of you this evening. I take the opportunity to wish all of you a freilichen Purim, an uplifting Purim. You know, we're living in a time now where we need another Purim miracle. We see our brothers and sisters, Achinu B'nai Yisrael, who are in the communities of Ukraine. And even those who have been privileged to get out of Ukraine are now in Eretz Yisrael are facing a brand new life with so much uncertainty and so much difficulty. Purim is the time where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says even that which looks like such a disaster can be turned around into beautiful Geula. Maybe Zoch Emir Hashem to see that on this Purim and Emir Hashem in all the days ahead. Again, thank you all for allowing me this opportunity and the Freilichen Purim.